I had to be rescued in Alaska. Hi, how are you? So 1989, I graduated from high school and my dad said to me, hey, you want to go to Alaska? And I said, sure. So we get on this plane and we fly to Anchorage from Portland. And then I'd never been to Alaska. And we get there and I guess there's some snow. What is this, like June? Okay. So we get in a car and I think we drive, how did we get there? Maybe by bus? Anyway, we go from Anchorage to Seward, and then from Seward, 12 miles outside of Seward, we go to Resurrection Bay, and we meet my dad's friend there, and my dad's friend has rented a cabin there on an island, and so we get on this boat and we leave Resurrection Bay and we leave the pier there and we go through Resurrection Bay to Fox Island, and which is a really cool island. I mean, it's got fir trees. It's got fir trees. And it's got a rocky shore with all kinds of rocks and wild nature stuff going on, and the water's cool. Of course, the boat is going like this, and so I'm not used to that. But we get to this island, and it's really cool, man. I'd never been to Alaska, and we're in the great outdoors, and there's this cool cabin, and we stay in this cabin, and we're there for a week. And I'm someone who was addicted to television at the time. I was like, I watched television every single day. So there was no television, no radio. There was a CB channel thing, so you could listen to the boaters out there on their CBs and stuff like that. But other than that, there was nothing to do. I was there for a week. And so I got so bored because I was walking around. We did go halibut fishing at one point, I believe, and we saw some really cool glaciers out on the boat. But then we came back to the island, and I was bored again. And so I would just spend time walking along the shore. I made some weird art with the seaweed. I saw some weird wildlife, like a beaver. And took these weird pictures. And so then eventually I did all that, and then I was like, what am I going to do? I'm bored. And so while my dad and his friend were out hiking, I decided I'd go on a hike. And so I walked along the shore, and I go around this edge of the island, and I'm walking, and it's really beautiful, and I've got my camera with me, so I'm taking some pictures of the water and the nature, and I get to this around this curve, and I get to a point where I can't go any further because there's foliage or something, but I figure I could get a pretty darn good view of the bay if I go up this island, and it's up like this. I mean, this is like a really steep angle, but I figured I'm going to get a really cool picture at the top of this mountain, and I've got nothing else to do. I was concerned about bears and Bigfoot and things like that, but I thought myself I was very brave. I'm going to get this picture, and hopefully Bigfoot won't get me. So I go up and I climb up this mountain, and it took about, 20 minutes. And I get to the top of this mountain, and I'm looking around, and it is beautiful. And I can see Alaska everywhere. I mean, there's just beautiful mountains with lush green trees and the beautiful blue water, and man, you can see the other islands and the shore, and it's just amazing. And you see little boats out there, going around in the far distance. And man, this is really cool. And I get a couple pictures. And then I head back down. And when I go back down the way I came, when I get down to the shore, there is no shore. The tide had come in, and there was no way for me to walk around the way that I came because the shore had disappeared because the tide had come in. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm stuck. And so the only way for me to go was back up the mountain. So I hiked back up the mountain, and I get up there, and I realize I can't go back down the other side because it's a cliff. And I can't go back this way because it's just brush and trees, and it's just, there's no way to go this way. There's no way to go this way because it's down back to the shore. It's back down to the shore here, and there's a total cliff right here. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I'm trapped on a mountain in Alaska, and no one is around. And there's been a couple of times in my life where I felt actual panic, like, uh-oh. I've really backed myself into a corner here with no way out. And, but this was like the most significant time I can think of where I was like in a big world of uh-oh. And I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know. So I just kind of stood there for a bit. And then luckily I see down below, there's a couple of boats. They're way down there, but they're down there. And I think, oh no, am I actually going to do this? Because if I do this, I'm going to look like an absolute idiot. But I thought, you know, die up here on a mountain in Alaska and nobody knows where I am, or look like an idiot. And I chose look like an idiot. So I yelled down to the boat, help! And I yell even louder. I say, help! And it gets, you know, help! And finally some guy comes out of the boat and he's like, what? He's yelling up at me. And I'm like, I'm trapped on the mountain. He's looking at me. He's like, what? Trapped on the mountain. I can't get down. The water came up. The shore is gone. What do I do? And you know, a couple of minutes go by where he didn't answer. And pretty soon, you see other boats from around the bay coming towards the mountain. Apparently, he had gotten on the CB and called the Coast Guard. And when he's on the CB calling the Coast Guard, that message goes out to every single boat in the area, and they can hear him calling this in, just like I had been listening on the CB in the cabin before I went up. And so all these boats start arriving at the base of the mountain, and here comes this boat, this Coast Guard boat. It's not very big, but they get to the bottom of the mountain, and the guy gets on the megaphone and he says, what's the problem? I said, I'm trapped, I'm stuck, I can't get down. And he says, walk down the path in front of you. Apparently, there was a path leading down towards the mountain. And it wasn't a very big path, but there was a bit of a line. And so I walked down towards the boats, following this very obscure path. And I go down and I get down, but I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere, even if I had gone to the shore, although I would have been closer to the boats and I probably could have, you know, asked for their assistance. But anyway, I get down to the area. There's no shore. It's just mountain and then water. And so I had to leap from the mountain area to the Coast Guard boat. And I get on the boat, and all of these boats are surrounding us. And I get on the Coast Guard boat, and everybody applauds, yay! And it was just so embarrassing. But at the same time, I was just so freaking relieved that I wasn't trapped on the mountain anymore. And so, you know, the Coast Guard guys are like, okay, sit down. And they give me a life jacket, and they gave me a root beer. And they get on they drive the boat around, past the other boats who were just looking at me like, oh, here's another idiot. Got lost in Alaska. And the Coast Guard boat takes me around back to the shore where the cabin is. And as we're approaching the shore, here comes my dad and his friend walking along the shore. And my dad is like, what? He sees the boat. He's like, oh, that's a boat. Wait, is that my son on the boat? And I'm like, hi, drinking my root beer. Got a life jacket. And the Coast Guard boat gets up to the shore, or they put me in a raft and then we went to the shore, one of the two. And then we get up there and I get out and onto the shore and I thank the Coast Guard guys, you know, thank you for saving my life. And they get back in their boat and they take off. Meanwhile, my dad is like looking at me like, what? What are you doing? He didn't even know I was gone. You know, they had been hiking, and I tell you, I was no longer bored on that island. I appreciated every second on that safe shore, that safe cabin. I was no longer, you know, bored and unappreciative of this wonderful cabin and this wonderful safe island. I learned to appreciate everything all over again. And you know, you never truly appreciate what you have until you almost lose everything. And that was the biggest wake-up call for me. And I don't know if I needed that at that time in my life, but I've thought about that moment so many times going forward. And it didn't prevent me from, you know, going on other further adventures. I mean, I left Portland and moved to San Francisco for 12 years, and I've traveled to places around the world and stuff like that. But I've always appreciated home, you know, like Dorothy. There's no place like home. I would add, there's no place safe like home. And so I appreciate this table, I appreciate this chair, I appreciate the floor, the solid floor, and every, you know, I have this silly thought that I did that, you know, you don't just appreciate what's happening, you also appreciate what's not happening. You know, giant donuts are not rolling down the city streets, you know. Godzilla is not, you know, taking over things. So I appreciate that those things are not happening. And so I appreciate everything in my life, and I appreciate all the things that are not happening, like being trapped on a mountain. And so that's my trapped on a mountain, had to be rescued by the Coast Guard story. And I got a couple of pictures. So anyway, have you ever had a situation like this? Have you ever been, you know, lost in the woods or traveling and you got into a situation of uh-oh, and you had to be rescued, or you just had to figure out a way out of it? Because that is just awful. It is an awful feeling, and I have done everything I possibly can never to have that feeling again. So if I do venture somewhere, I always venture smartly, and I do things very exact, and I plan things out, and I guess I'm very cautious. I learned to be cautious, but not overly cautious. Anyway, that's my Alaska had to be rescued story. So I would love to hear your thoughts and comments, and if you've had a similar experience. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week about something silly. And man, I hope you have a great week. And I hope you never get trapped on a mountain in Alaska or anywhere. All right, have a great week.